Hey guys, welcome back to Kerbal Space Programs Nitro. Well, picking up right where I left off here on the last episode, episode 20, I have latched onto this asteroid and I started a burn to get it back into the Kerbin orbit, and I have just completed that burn here, and that did use up all of my RCS because this thing likes to wobble and shake as you fire it, because we're not directly on the center of mass. So all of these RCS things are completely depleted. We're still good on power, and I still have plenty of fuel, and the burn was successfully completed all the way. So we do have an intercept over here with Kerbin, and that should, it looks like an impact intercept, which is actually kind of what I want, because as we come in, it'll just take a minor adjustment to get us into an aerobraking maneuver. So that's what I'm looking for, and it will take a little bit for our ship to go all the way around. I tested out the launch escape system earlier, and it's pretty cool, but you'd have to plan for your rocket exploding, I guess, in order for it to actually be effective, or rapidly press the spacebar to activate it, because you need a decoupler underneath of your main command pod in order for it to actually work. Otherwise, it won't wrench your pod up and away from the ship and get it to safety, because it doesn't auto detach the pod on its own. But it is pretty effective if you do have a decoupler there. Uh, it's just a neat little feature. It's not really something that's necessarily useful, because you could just revert back to launch or back to vehicle simply from the escape menu. So I don't really see myself using it all that much, but it is a cool little thing that they added with the NASA rocket pack. Oh yeah, and they also added a new flag that you guys can get, and it goes on the side of your ship. It's the NASA flag, so, or the NASA emblem, so you can have that on the side of your ship as well. So just check in the flag menu for that one. Alright, so we have our intercept here, getting pretty close. And as Kerbin rotates around the sun, all these little asteroids and things will come in, and tiny, I haven't seen that one either. All these tiny little asteroids will keep coming in and keep getting close to Kerbin, so you don't really have to, venture out of Kerbin orbit until you have one that, comes close that you want to intercept. Otherwise, it's just not really effective to try and go outside of Kerbin orbit and intercept one of these things, because you'll just be wasting a ton of fuel and time really doing that. So as we come in here, alright, so that is our trajectory, and we don't have a periapsis, so I need a maneuver node somewhere here, and I actually can't get one, but let's see, I just have to figure out which way I'm aimed. RCS system off, so burning does, oh, there we go. If I can get that right around 50,000, that would be ideal. So let's see what it's stopped at here. 53,000, that's perfect. So what I'm actually going to do is let Kerbin do all the work for me and do an aerobraking maneuver around Kerbin. And once that's done, I'll have a ton of fuel that I can just use to bring this thing into a circularized orbit, because it's going to be really hard for me to maneuver this thing because I'm not on the center of mass. So I can't really afford to do a whole lot of burns to try and get this thing stable. But we'll be okay with this. So we'll see how it looks coming through the atmosphere here, and we can speed that up. Okay. So one of the other nifty little features that they added to the game is if you have a ship that you set a target to something, even if you go back to the Space Center and then go back to flying your ship, that target will remain selected throughout the entire process until you deselect that target. So that's kind of cool. You don't lose any of the things that you were tracking. So we are going to come in on the dark side of the planet here, but that's okay. This is kind of a point of no return. Just got to check that, so we're good. This is a pretty nasty inclination, but if this gives us an orbit, I'll be able to hopefully get us more stabilized along the equator without too much extra fuel expenditure doing that. So let's see here. There's the moon, there's Kerbin, there's Kerbin. So it looks like we're going to come in backwards here, but that's alright. Alright, here we go, entering the atmosphere, and we'll see how much that slows us down by. I really didn't plan for using up all this much RCS, but now that I know that, one of the things that would have been useful to have on the ship is a docking port so I can refuel it once it gets back to Kerbin, just so I have that extra RCS available to me. And I'm actually going to have to use the SAS system to rotate this thing around because I don't have any RCS to undock from this and then reattach. So I have no maneuvering capability right now once the ship detaches from the asteroid. So we are in the depths of the atmosphere. Here we go. So we do have orbit, which is good. And I'm going to assist that a little bit. As much as possible here. It's doing a very low level burn, and it's still pushing me up here. We're rotating the asteroid. Yeah. So can't really do too much, but we do have an orbit now, so that's a good thing. And now I just need to grab one of these ships here. It says a target, and then attempt to do an inclination change. Now, yeah, something like that. Yeah, 77 meters per second. I don't actually think that's doable in one pass, just because of how unstable this thing is right now. So it might take a couple of orbits here, but we'll see how this goes. I can still use the time warp to stop the rotation. The SAS system actually seems to be doing quite well, so I guess that's a benefit of this being such a small asteroid, is that I can actually rotate this thing with SAS, but with larger asteroids, you definitely need heavy RCS and SAS systems in order to maneuver it. There we go. And one of the things I need to figure out, and that I've really been wondering about with these things, is since they are essentially classified as a ship as far as the programming is concerned, and we are docked to it, I do wonder if I have any additional claws on this, if I can activate those through regular staging, if they'll show up here if I have additional things on this, because if that is true, then I could potentially just attach a bunch of parachutes and extra engines to this thing, and even an RCS maneuvering block to it or something along those lines to allow for easier maneuvering of the asteroid. I do want to try and land this thing on the surface of Kerbin, if possible. Probably, I'm going to aim for the KSC, but it probably won't even come close to that. So, I would like to do a land landing, but not a water landing, because I don't think it'll survive. It'll just poof into smoke, or however these things impact. We'll find out. We'll see an impact here for sure. After I send my second claw unit up here to test and see how these things work. And one of those I should just be able to build real quickly in the VAB. So, getting close. I do want to give myself a few minutes leeway room here. Alright, so we'll try something like this and see how much I can accelerate. Not a whole lot. So this may take a little while to get this done, unfortunately. Oh, there we go. So if I try to do a couple of really strong burns, I might be able to actually get this thing to do what I want it to do. I do have to be really careful because this is wanting to break on me. It's probably a good thing I put these extra struts on this part of the ship, because otherwise I'm pretty sure it would have snapped off by now. This is funny to watch this thing wobble. Alright. Oops. Come on. There we go. I just wanted to use a time warp there to stop the rotation. It's a little trick you can do. Which might actually work if I do it enough. I'll probably get it to stop. So even with the RCS system, this was still a pretty rough thing to try and do, just because I am so far off from the center of mass here. And with larger asteroids, I don't really see this as being much of a problem, because hopefully they'll be more round than this thing is, because of something so oddly shaped. The center mass is just going to be more off, and it's really kind of hard to try and find it. I guess it would be more here, so I'm off to the side a little bit. Probably should have clipped on right there in the middle. We're getting there, slowly but surely. We got a good portion of this maneuver burn already done, so shouldn't be too long. Alright, and there goes our next set of engines. So, you want to be a little careful when I jettison these things. Don't want them hitting my ship. Oh, she's wobbling. I just want to thrust away from those so they clear my my ship here. So I still have full fuel and all this, so we're pretty much good, and I am losing weight from the ship. So not really sure how that affects center mass of this. But ultimately, that does mean that it will take less thrust to move this thing, because now we all weigh less. Alright, so that's actually getting fairly close here. For my next mission, I'm going to try and find a larger one and see how different it is to get one of those things. There is a challenge currently up on the KSP forums, and it's one that you would probably expect to land an asteroid on top of the vehicle assembly building. So I might actually try that here. We'll see how well the parachute idea works. But it'll have to be done in pretty much one shot, because there's no way I'm going to be able to pilot something like this precisely. So I'm pretty much just going to have to drop it from orbit. And for precision landing on top of the VAB, that's pretty difficult. You probably have to go for a tiny asteroid in order to do it, because the vehicle assembly building roof is only about, maybe even 1.5 times the size of this thing, maybe 2 times, but it's not that large. It does have a couple of helicopter pads up on top of it if you guys haven't checked it out yet. Alright, so that's good enough. Let's just close out of that maneuver node and see what we got. So 0.2, that's good enough. Don't really need much more than that. So let's go ahead and do another aerobrake. Alright, so now we're coming in here for our second aerobrake. And I think it went right. Oh, that's right, our periapsis moved. So we no longer have that inside of the atmosphere. So what I'm going to have to do is do a burn up here at Appalaps to fix that. This is a small little retrograde burn is all we need. This won't take much, like barely 1 or 2 meters per second. So now that we're up here, it's at 100,000. No, that's not good. I don't want an intercept with the moon. That'll really screw us out of whack. Oh, that's horrible. I mean, that could put us on an impact or even shoot us out of the Kerbin orbit, depending on how close we get to this thing. And it looks like it's really going to screw with my inclination as well, and I do not want that. So I'm going to have to fix that as I'm going through Kerbin's atmosphere. Oops. Alright. See what a burn gives us. so 40,000 is pretty good. That should bring us down within the moon's orbit. Because once you get near about 30,000 meters or so, or in that range, you start to really decrease your velocity from the aerobrake. So anywhere between 40,000 and 50,000 is usually where I would like to do for a regular ship for this thing, because we have to get down so low. Looks like 42,000, so yeah, that should be good. If it was in the 30s, I'd probably feel a little bit better about it, but I think this will be fine. So I am coming in around the back way here, so I do want to try and rotate before we approach the atmosphere, so I still have maneuvering capabilities. In the atmosphere, I won't be able to turn this thing at all. Be way too much drag. And the reason for this is, if this doesn't bring us within the moon's orbit, I'm going to have to do another little burn as much as I can while it's headed through the atmosphere, just so I can bring that apoapsis within the moon's orbit. Because I don't want to have any sort of gravitational impact that the moon might have on this thing. Alright. Oh, come on. There we go. Alright. So let's see what this does to our velocity here in the orbital view. So we're not quite to 42,000 yet, but once we get inside the 40,000 meter range here, I'll probably start a little burn. Wonder if it catches fire. No, doesn't look like we're gonna have any re-entry effects. So I'm gonna start my burn now. There we go. So now we're safe from the moon, which is all I really wanted. So that looks good. We have to do one more pass through the atmosphere, and I can probably fix our inclination as well once we get up to that point. Still got plenty of fuel. So I did pack enough fuel for this entire mission, which is great. And I do still want to get these guys home safely. I do have parachutes loaded on this thing, so they will be able to land once we have this thing in orbit. I just want to get this in orbit first. I'm going to leave the anchor here, and then get Captain Kirk and his crew back home. And then I'll send up another mission to see what I can do about parachuting this thing down to the surface. That will be phase 2. So I'll just use physical time warp here to try and get us through the atmosphere as fast as possible. And see where we're at here. There we go. So now I can go back into orbit and try to fix this inclination just a bit. And I do know this is probably going to screw with my periapsis. Not too bad. So it looks about the same, which is great. And only, 2.9 meters per second, so that's definitely doable. I did start a brand new career mode as well, now that we have a bunch of new parts and things out. And they really don't get unlocked until tier tier 6, tier 7 research values, so that's kind of good. And that was only the super large engines and things like that, some of the new NASA level rockets that we've all been waiting for. If you don't play with mods, if you play with mods, and you've probably already been using them for quite a while. Should be able to do this like pretty much right on the money, so I'm not really worried about the time. Again, it's gonna wobble a bit, but yeah, it looks fine. So yeah, it's jitter in there, so that means not a number, right? 0.0 not a number, so that's perfect. And 42,000 still, so that's great. So that means we can go ahead and do our next pass through the atmosphere here. And since we didn't have a re-entry effect, that means we're not really receiving that high of a drag from the atmosphere, because we still are pretty high up in Kerbin's atmosphere, so don't really have to worry too much about having our apoapsis drop to within the atmosphere, because then we're in trouble. Then we're headed in hot and I'm going to have to do emergency ejection, but that won't happen. Alright. So coming back into the atmosphere here, I just want to try and stabilize this thing and watch our apoapsis and periapsis from orbital this time, just to see how much it drops. And we just entered the atmosphere, so we're about 60,000 meters and falling. And it looks like this is odd. I think it's counting in the wobble of the ship somehow. So I'm not actually going to keep this as our target anymore, because we don't need that. We're only worried about achieving orbit now. I think I'm going to put this into a relatively high orbit around Kerbin, so probably somewhere around the Hubble, maybe 250,000 just to be safe. Yeah, so it's falling pretty good here. Might take a couple of orbits to actually get this down all the way, it looks like. So if we drop 1 million meters per rotation, that'll be pretty good. Looks like it might actually be a little bit more than that. Alright. Yeah, so 2 million meters. Still well within the atmosphere, but it's slowing down. Not too bad, though. I could actually achieve orbit if I wanted to with just fuel and get it perfect, but this is working out pretty good so far, so I think I'll just keep up with the aerobraking. Actually, physical time warp is a pretty risky thing to do, I think, with this asteroid. As you can see, it's spinning there. Yeah, with physical time warp, I would really say try not to move at all with the asteroid attached, otherwise it'll most likely snap. So keep an eye on it. But it hasn't snapped so far because I think it's reinforced properly. Or maybe it's just a strong attachment point with the claw, who knows? But it's working out so far. So I'll just go ahead and go back into physical time warp here. As we pass through the atmosphere one more time, this actually should bring us down relatively close, because it did drop us 2 million meters last time we went in. It looks like it might do about the same thing here. Almost. One or two more, and we should be good. Yeah, so I think I can go through the atmosphere one more time, and then I'm just going to work with whatever apoapsis it gives me there, because I don't think I want to go through it another time after that. One of the good things about the claw, actually, is you can latch on to any part that you can build in the BAB, so if you're doing my versatility marathon challenge on the forums, or if you like playing with some degree of realism and without deleting space debris, you can actually build a cleanup crew that will go up into space, grab any debris, and then deorbit it. So that's one of the things that you could do with Claw, which is pretty nifty. It might also give us new possibilities for docking solutions for docking different types of craft together. But we'll just have to play with it and see. So far, I like it. It seems to work fairly smoothly, at least for the asteroids. I'm not sure how well it'll do for parts. I'll have to test that later with one of the jumbo fuel tanks. See if I can tow one of those things through space. Oh yeah, that's a perfect drop right there. So that's about what I wanted, actually. That's close to 250,000 meter orbit. So now I just have to stabilize this, and we're in business. I'm still in the atmosphere, actually, so I'll drop a little bit more, but it's gonna be within 270. 278 it looks like is, yeah. So that's perfect. Just what I wanted, and we should still be fairly circularized. It doesn't really matter since I'm going to be sending up another ship later anyways. I'll probably just keep it where it is there and not really worry too much about it. Just at 277 is fine. We're within 1 minute of apoapsis. I can start my burn actually. Looks like I can't really rotate too well, but that's fine. Just have to get this circularized a little bit. this is going to take a little bit of playing with the controls, but that's not too bad. A few bursts from the engine and we should be at 70,000. And then I really don't have to worry about it. Come on. Almost there. This thing is spinning pretty bad. And when I detach this, I think I'm going to try to rotate this so I have these solar panels here facing the sun, so I can keep this thing constantly charged every time it passes around. Or actually, if I can put that right at the pole, they should receive electrical charge every time it rotates, because the normal direction of the asteroid won't change as it orbits, since it's on circular equatorial orbit. So let's see, 70. Alright, so we're now safe. Do want to try to get it up there a little bit more. Yeah. It keeps spinning though, so I don't know if I just want to leave it the way it is or not. Actually, can you plant a flag on this thing? I think you can. Maybe. Be kind of hard, right? Because there's no gravity on this thing. Well, there is gravity, it's just so minuscule that it doesn't really matter. Far less than minimus. Oh yeah, one of the things is this claw won't grab onto any of the celestial bodies, so you can't like latch on to Minimus or anything like that, or even on the surface of Kerbin. You can only latch onto other parts and asteroids. So you can't latch it onto anything that's on rails, essentially. And since all of these planets in the system rotate on basically a rail system, you cannot deorbit Minimus or anything like that yet. Or Gilly, I mean, is the one I was thinking of. I don't know why I was saying Minimus. Probably because of the name Mini Minimus. But yeah. So you can't latch onto like Gilly or anything. Gilly, Bop, Pole, any of the Jewel Moons, which kind of sucks actually for Gilly, because Gilly has such low gravity that you kind of bounce around whenever you go to land there, so having the claw grab onto the surface of Gilly just for landings I think would actually be a lot better, but yeah, you can't do it, unfortunately. So let's look at where we're at here. We're at 93,278, so I think I'm just gonna orbit here and drop that down a little bit. And the reason I want to get this kind of circularized is because whenever I launch anything up from the surface, I want to be able to easily intercept this thing. And it's a lot easier to do that when your orbit's large and you can go inside of it. Otherwise, you have to go outside of it and then intercept it at a high velocity. So that's why I'm trying to get this relatively circularized here. So now that we have asteroids in the game, there's so many different things that you could probably do with them, and I mean, I want to try a couple of impacts into the Kerbin Ocean just so I can watch them and see if I can watch them from down on the planet itself and see what it looks like and follow it in. Although I'm not sure if that's possible yet, if you can switch to something on the land while it's on a impact trajectory, but we'll see. So, it's still spinning pretty hard. I just want to kind of get outside the orbit of these things. So let's see if I can drop this anymore. There we go. So that's what I wanted. Alright, 250,000. Still pretty circular, so that's good. Actually, I can check. Yeah, we're still at 0.0, so that's perfect. Alright, and then as we come around, if I do a hard burst, I might be able to get this thing to over 100,000 or somewhere around 250, we'll see. You just have to use the engine for as much as it's worth while it's still headed downwards, just so I can counteract its spin, the engine power, for a little bit. Alright, so now's the time to rotate. Alright, so that was a hard burst, got us up to 100,000. And it's not quite outside of that orbit yet. Might just be able to rotate it all the way back here again if you're watching this on the nav ball. So that's retrograde. Just have to spin it around the prograde again. Kind of roll with the asteroid, and then once it slows down, once I approach this point here, I should be able to hit it again. Yeah, like that. So that's 115 or so. And it'll spin pretty good. Hope these guys are having a good time up here. Just flying around on a little asteroid above their planet. Alright, so that's outside of that orbit. If it impacts with the Hubble, no big deal. I don't think it will. So, 100,000. Orbit's a little off, but I'm just about done messing with this thing. So, let's see now. That detaches that, which I can actually probably keep, so let's just orient this thing up to normal. And then I'm gonna undock and head back down to the surface of Kerbin here. And I think I'm just gonna try and land in the desert somewhere because it's relatively flat, good landing zone. And I'll come back up here with another ship and see if I can attach parachutes to this thing, and then we can start thinking about deorbiting it. Alrighty, I just need the wrong way. Spin, damn you. There we go. So what I wanted to do here is get those solar panels facing the sun, just so that docking port will always be powered up, just in case those electrical generators don't work. Wobbling pretty bad there. Okay, so ready to detach now. Alright, we are free. RCS capabilities. Let's go this way. Thrust away from it. Alright, good. So there's our docking port there on the claw. I'm going to leave that up on top there. Those antennas. See if I can switch to it. I can. So this has a unmanned module on it. So this is still technically a ship that's attached to this thing. So I can extend my little antennas that I have here. There we go. Back to my ship. And we're good to go for landing, so I can use up the entirety of this fuel here, and then the rest of this is just my landing engine. So now that we have the asteroid safely in orbit, okay, landing here, we're coming up on the desert, so that'll be good. I'm just gonna eyeball it. I don't need maneuver nodes. Alright. So let's see here, retrograde, there we go. Come in somewhere right here. Looks like the best spot. The planet will rotate as I come in, but that's alright. Still got a lot of fuel in this fuel tank. So definitely planned well for that. Shouldn't need my lights on anymore. Let's see. I still have power generation from these solar panels, so we're good to go on that. And let's go ahead and head in. Looks like we're gonna come in right where I want to land too. So that's perfect. Yeah, looks good. Yeah, I might need my lights. Looks like we're coming into nighttime over here. I could actually do a powered landing even without parachutes, but there's really no need. So let's go ahead and accelerate through time warp. That's about good. engines was I didn't want this thing to accidentally rip off or anything as I was coming in, but looks like I'm going for a nice soft landing as the rest of that engine explodes beneath us. And there we go. Home safe. Captain Kirk has completed his first mission, and we're ready to go back up to the asteroid. So let's go ahead and check orbital view real quick to see where we're at. So there's a Hubble, there's Hendrix, and now it appears as a probe because I still have that probe core left up there. And see the debris. Alright, so those are those two fuel tanks that I had. So instead of doing this, where I'm terminating these, if you really wanted to, you could get the claw, go up there, grab onto it, and then manually deorbit it. Which I'll have to do in my versatility marathon challenges, because that'll make deorbiting debris a whole load easier. Alright, so there's Hendrix right here, and I can check its orbital path. And I don't think we have any more incoming asteroids. Oh, there's a large one actually. Huge. So I think they go tiny to huge is so far what I've seen. So Class E is the largest one I've had. So if they go from Class A to E so far, if there's a Class F, then Kerbin's in trouble. But they're even in trouble from, large and huge ones. If one of those things hit the planet, it'd leave a crater like this, and the Kerbal Space Center on the other side of the planet would be no more. We'd have some planetary annihilation going on. Which, by the way, is a pretty fun game if you haven't played it yet. Alright, so now I want to try getting a workable parachute on Kerbin. So, for that mission, I'm going to need to attach something upside down. So this is what I need, but I don't know if that's going to be possible. So basically want a whole bunch of these things. Let's see here, center mass. Okay. This might actually be possible if I can get the center mass of this thing to be right in the middle, which right now it's not. So I need to raise the center mass somehow. Because what I want to do is I want to take this thing, mount it to a ship like that, and then just launch it up there. And I don't really think there's any other way to do it. Unless... I know what I can do. I can do, maybe these? Right? If I get two of these, and then, let's see. actually, maybe not even these. I need smaller attachment points. It's one of the little tricks you can do with these little octagonal struts. Is if you flip them, you can slide them inside there like that, and then you can have another one like this or not. Let's see here. Should work. Maybe if I have two of them, it'll work. Yeah, now it'll work. So, like that. And then one like that. Yeah. So, something along those lines. I need fuel. So, I want the attachment point for it. Here it is. So one of those and one of these. Oops. Not sure if that'll eject. Hopefully it will. Because then you should be able to just attach, yeah, so now I can attach fuel to the side of this thing. Or even if I went the opposite way and used a regular octagonal strut, I might be able to do the same thing. Not sure. Oh yeah, I can. Alright, so if I just put engines on the side of this thing, then it should work for the same purpose. And the reason I got small ones here is because I don't want to extend past the reach of the claw. So now I just need to grab this inner point here. So I can do a double attachment. Like this. Now grab two. And then you can snap them on there like that. Okay. And let's just go ahead and test it real quick. Outside, see how it works. Yeah, so that works exactly how I want it to, actually. Now the pod can deploy the parachute. So when it attaches to the asteroid, it'll be attached like this. And then I want to be able to deploy parachutes like that from multiple attachment points like this one. And I think it'll work, but no way to find out yet. So now that I have that, just have to figure out how to make it go. Here we go. Actually, that's probably not even enough RCS. Probably should have a lot of RCS. it somewhere else. Be on the sides. Can I fit a bigger one on there? I think I can. Looking derpy. Might be able to. Oh yeah. There we go. Well. Yeah, maybe not. Just use these small ones. So it's about right there. Alright, that looks right. There we go. Alright. So, hopefully this is enough fuel. I'm not sure. So let's add a couple boosters. How big are these things? Oh yeah, that was pretty big. Alright, so let's add a couple of those. Just in case. I know liquid fuel's more efficient and blah blah blah, but I like boosters, so I'm gonna use them. Come on. Yeah. Because boosters are cool. That's why we use them. And hopefully they don't overheat the engine. Looks about right. Hard to tell. And these new boosters look pretty cool too, and they actually last twice as long as the other ones, I think. So they come in pretty handy if you don't want to spend time rigging up a fuel system. Let's see. Can attach right here. Accidentally attach this to the pod. To go there. There we go. There. So now we got that. Just need a couple on this side. It's nice and secure. It should be enough duct tape. Looks like I got it on both sides. Everything looks good. Alright, we should be ready to launch. Pretty high up off the ground. So let's drop it a little bit. And a couple of these. Okay. And last but not least, a little bit of thermoelectric power. So those are right here. Now, I use these on pretty much every ship I build because they are so efficient to have. Went down to 2. Well, that's good enough. 2 should be fine. So, got 2 of those, which will also make sure that this thing constantly has power, which we always need. Otherwise, we're in trouble. This thing might be a little hard to handle, so almost want an additional SAS unit, might be helpful. Let's put one of these on there, just in case. Just so it turns a little nicer. Shouldn't need any sort of wings or anything, but this is our ship, and it should do the job. Alright, so those are our boosters. These 2 go first. Now the boosters should end before the liquid fuel does, you would think. So those 2 go. Then when these 2 go, these engines need to fire. And after those are done, these 2 go, and these engines fire. And then we need a new stage for that decoupling, and then parachute. Alright, so Asteroid parachute. And let's see how it does. Alright, looks good. Let's see, power's stable. Here we go. Please don't blow up. We're coming up right on it here, which looks perfect. We got a nice apoapsis. Inclination looks a bit off, but hopefully I'll be able to achieve orbit with this low amount of fuel. Should be fine though. See what happens here as we get closer. Alright, good. So we did have enough fuel. Now we got plenty of fuel. Alright. So let's go ahead and set Hendrix as target. Alright, this is why I wanted that intercept here, because we can get real close. I'm just using RCS right now and try to bring that as close as possible. Like that. That looks good. So 1.4 and there it is. So do have a bit of an inclination change I can do. Ever so slightly. Alright, now number, and that gives us still 1.4. So we'll see what that does. Slight burn. And then we'll be good to go to attach, and then I'll be able to switch over to the pod that's already on Hendrix and see what it gives us for the staging. Because if the stage exists here for the parachute while this thing is attached to the asteroid, then that means it's deployable and usable. So it doesn't matter how many ships I have attached to it, it'll all count as one ship, and I'll be able to activate all the parachutes on the asteroid all at the same time. So that's what I'm looking for. Alright, so 0.1, perfect. Let's check the intercept. It shouldn't have moved. Moved a little bit. That's okay. 1.4 is perfect. So, let's see. Asteroid parachute, there's Hendrix right there. And coming up on it. And we have our target velocity, which is great. There we go. Hendrix is in sight. We actually have a ton of fuel left, so this is excellent. Let's go ahead and change this over. Alright, so now we're headed straight for it. 35 meters per second, roughly. Okay, so this is going to be very easily manageable speed once we get close to it. Alright, getting pretty close. I can actually see that light. Alright, 5. So coming in real close to it here. Just time warp a little bit just so we don't have to wait so long. And let's see, I need to figure out how I'm gonna get rid of these. I think I'm just gonna thrust up a little bit and then jettison and then turn around. Okay. I did delete the interceptor satellite that I had here earlier, so it no longer exists. Now one of the things that I just really need to figure out is how am I going to go about actually deorbiting this thing? Because whichever way it deorbits, I need to have parachutes on top of it. And so if I attach down here again, where I was with my ship to deorbit the thing, that means my parachutes had better be on the opposite end of that. So I want to put them over here on the top. So I think I'm going to maneuver over there instead. And I should be able to get, hopefully, within view of the sun here, just so I can do this during the daylight. It's not so darn dark. Just have to use RCS to correct my drift. There we go. Alright. So, arm the hook again, and might need to take those off. So let's point it up at normal. Rotate it a little bit here, and bring it that way. Alright, so let's see where I can latch on. I guess on these nubs up here. If I can get it right inside this crevice here, that would be kind of ideal, I guess. So I'll just try for that. And we're attached. And I did jettison those things just to try and prevent any blockage that they might cause when I try to go to attach to this thing. So we are attached, and I still have a stage. But there's not a stage for the other thing because there's no stage here. So now I'm going to launch up the second one. I'm going to see if I still have a parachute, and if I have 2 parachutes available, then we're in business, and we can actually start to think about deorbiting this thing. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this debris here, and then launch up number 2, and see how that goes. So I'm going to pause it here, and I'll just bring you guys back in once I have number 2 up here, and I'm coming to hook it in. Alright, well I'm back here, and this is number 2 of my parachutes I have up here at Hendrix. And I did make a slight little change to the ship, and that's I put these little adapter things up here instead of the nose cones. I don't really do anything, I just do it so they look cool. I think the nose cones do actually reduce drag just a hair, but not really a noticeable change when you have an excess amount of fuel. So now I just have to figure out where I want to put number 2 here, and I think I'm going to put it up on this little nub. So pretty close to number 1, and then I'll put, just kind of space them all out. I do want several, because I'm not really sure how many I'm going to need to get this thing safely down on the ground at Kerbin. Okay. That's about good. And I shouldn't need to jettison these things quite yet. That should be just about good. Move it in here for the grab. Right about there. And eject. And we're attached. And this is actually perfect. This is good news. Because what we can see here is we do indeed have both parachutes available in a stage. And that means that if I deorbit this thing, I can in fact activate everything that's attached to an asteroid individually, and all at the same time if need be. So if I attach multiple engines onto this thing, I can move it with all of those engines. If I attach multiple parachutes, I can move it with all those parachutes. And if you have things up here with RCS tanks and things like that, then that also means that you can use them as RCS blocks and effectively sort of build up a base on an asteroid, if you will, and you can maneuver it much more effectively. So I think that is really the best course of action would be to bring kind of like a hive of little ships like this up to an asteroid with little RCS blocks and things like that, and just attach them all over. Especially SAS systems like this, because what this will mean is the more that I have on here, the more easily I'll be able to turn and maneuver this thing. So it's actually very, very good news. And even right now with the SAS system, I can sort of rotate it just a hair. And that's very useful information to have. And the power here is going to be perfect because I do have thermoelectric generators on everything I have on here, which I think is the way to go. So that is a pretty handy little bit of useful information. So if you guys are trying this for the first time and you haven't yet gone up to an asteroid, send a ship with multiple grabbers, multiple little pods of unmanned ships with like a little bit of RCS on it, and send them over and attach them one at a time, so that way you can make it a lot easier to control. Because I guarantee you, if you attach a bunch of things on here with SAS systems and RCS systems, uh, it'll be a lot easier to control. So I think that is the best course of action. And once I get enough parachutes on here, I'm going to attempt to land this thing down on the ground safely, hopefully. So I think I'm going to need somewhere around, I don't know, like 10 to at least 10, at minimum 10 of these large parachutes to land, maybe 20. I'm going to have to attach a couple of drogue chutes on here because I don't want it stopping at the last minute. And then I'm also going to need an engine system. and I think having liquid fuel along with jet engines is probably the best course of action. Because if I have multiple jet engines on here, I can slow it down gradually as it comes through the atmosphere, and the fuel will be a lot more conservative as well. I don't want to use the Rapier engines because I think regular just jet engines will be perfect, and the Rapiers really aren't that efficient. I think I'm going to deorbit it with regular liquid fuel though. But so far so good. We have 2 parachutes ready to go. I'm going to get more on here, and in the next video I'll have this thing fully rigged up and we can finally land an asteroid. And I think I'm going to try to land it right at the KSC. I'll get as close to the Kerbal Space Center as I can, depending on how well this thing flies with multiple engines on it. I'll do a little test burn to see how controllable it is once I rig up my engines. And this is going to be total planetary annihilation status here on this thing. I'm going to have like a bunch of Halleys, like what you would have on planetary annihilation, and go for an asteroid impact. So it should be pretty fun. So thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned for the next episode. I'll try to have that up very shortly here. Hopefully I'll get it done within the same time I have this one uploaded. And I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching.